And hello, Pokemon trainers, and welcome to episode 5 of Soundproof. And more importantly, welcome to our special edition emergency
Ooh.
launch worlds episode. Of course, this is kind of, for the second episode in a row, a little bit of a break from our usual launch schedule, but we figured we couldn't go a week without talking about exactly what happened at the World Championships. So here we are. Again, my name is Brendan Lewis. I go by Mr. BDog46 on websites that matter, and I'm joined by Jake Muller, my good friend, who of course goes by Major Bowman on all relevant Pokemon websites. And we're super excited to be here again with you for episode 5 to talk about Worlds.
Yeah, Worlds just happened this past weekend. It was super fun to watch. Brendan got to go there and spectate in person. So
I did, against
yeah,
all odds.
yeah. I, in conjunction with all odds, was not there because I had 2 holes in my mouth that are still there, mostly healed up by now. Uh,
Well, your voice sounds fine.
yeah, and
And
that's
that's
really
what's
what
really
matters. My
important. You gotta
beautiful,
protect
pristine
the
voice has not changed
the
at all.
money-making vocal cords.
Exactly. Yes, all the money
That's
we're
what
bringing in.
all the money that we make here. You gotta save the vocal cords. Teeth fine, but vocal cords, those are the important ones. So we're gonna get into talking to Worlds in just a couple minutes. But for this episode, episode 5, even though it is a surprise episode, we do want to launch this new segment that I admittedly stole from a podcast that I watch about the New York Mets, but I thought it was really cool. So basically, I'm just going to explain it kind of briefly and then we'll get into it. This is episode 5, or for the purposes of this little segment here, episode 05. So we are going to talk briefly about some of the Pokemon that by Dex number end in 05. And I think this is kind of cool. It gives us a chance to like break away from some of the VGC specific stuff that we usually do and discuss some of, like the wider Pokemon world and Pokemon that otherwise would never, ever, as you'll see from this list, make its way onto our podcast.
Yeah, I'm really excited. This is something really cool. There's a lot of like random like memories I have with random Pokemon from playing through the games, and so obviously none of that is relevant to VGC, so wouldn't ever get brought up otherwise. This is gonna like a little fun segment to talk about some Pokemon that might not get some love otherwise.
Yeah, I think this is really cool. So we'll start off, and of course we're going to go through all the Pokemon ending in 05. So the first one, 05, is of course Charmeleon. I'm sure most of you could identify that one by number if you've been around for a while. Not super important in any sense, and honestly, to me, kind of a forgettable Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean it's okay. My biggest memory of Charmeleon is the one that Ash had in the anime, and it always like got angry and attacked him and was just not very fun to be around.
Yeah, it was kind of a wet blanket, but number 105, of course, another Gen 1 Pokemon is Marowak, and that's one that has seen a little bit of VGC success and is actually a world champion last year, so
Yeah.
cool to talk about that one. It, of course, has 2 forms now, one of which is good and one of which will never see the light of day.
I really like
Uh,
Alolan Marowak. I think it's a really cool Pokemon. Just like
the design is neat.
yeah, thematically, aesthetically. I like Ghost and Fire types independently, and so like Marowak and Chandelure are 2 of my favorites, and I really like purple as a color, and the purple in Marowak is neat, and that's one of the plushes I have sitting on my desk actually. So
Yeah, it's a
pretty
neat
good,
Pokemon.
pretty good.
Number 205 is Forretress. Not VGC relevant, but important in singles, and also kind of a cool Pokemon. I forget who I was talking to somebody about this over the weekend, where in Gen 2, when Forretress was released, obviously, I'm pretty sure it was the only Pokemon that learned Protect.
Oh really?
And it learned it by level up. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I remember you get to the Elite Four, and who has it? Somebody has Forretress. Is it Koga? It's gotta
Maybe
be Koga.
yeah.
I think it's Koga, and he just like protects with Fortress, even though like it's not really accomplishing anything. Like, oh, you protected my Fire Blast. I'm gonna go ahead and use that again next
Right.
turn. But anyway, number 305 is Lairon. We discussed the
Lairon, the
pronunciation
like
of this. I think it's
baby.
Lairon, right?
Yeah, the one before Aggron.
Lyron.
I thought I was always saying Lairon in my head, but then I
Yeah, that
realized
makes
I've
more
never said
sense.
it out loud because I've never had the need to. So I've
Right.
never had anyone
And
correct
here we
me.
are on a podcast.
Yeah.
Number 405 is Luxray, which is an extremely popular Pokemon among most of the fan base. Not one that I personally care for, but it's kind of neat. It would be better. It would be cool if it was Dark type.
Oh, true. I think Luxray is one of the Pokemon that gets like fan art megas a lot, and they always make it
Oh yeah,
electric
big
dark.
time.
This
That
weekend
would
when
be
I
neat.
was sitting at home recovering, I like opened Pokemon Go one time, and I hatched some eggs from Adventure Sync, and I got a shiny Shinx, and so now I have a shiny Luxray,
Ooh,
and it's really
nice.
fun.
That's a good one. Number 505 is Watchog, one of the worst and most forgettable Pokemon ever, and really just kind of lends a lot of weight to the argument in favor of getting rid of the national Dex in Sword and Shield. Like,
That's harsh.
do we need Watchog? Do we need it?
I mean, no, not at all.
Right.
But wow,
Uh,
you're
anyway.
advocating for the elimination of
I'm
hundreds
not
of
advocating
Pokemon.
for it. I'm just saying
No,
that it
you are,
lends,
Brendan.
it
I
lends
think you've
weight
taken the
to
official stance
it
that you are
lends
in
weight
favor
to
of
those
Dexit.
that do advocate for
Brendan
it.
voted Dexit, everyone. Trend it on Twitter.
Anyway, number 605 is Elgium, which is, I don't know, it's like kind of a neat, like I guess the design is kind of cool. It's like an alien robot
Yeah.
thing.
I think
Okay,
one of the funny things about that line is that I forget what it is. I think it's Steelwing. TM51 in Gen 5 is Steelwing,
Uh-huh.
and you would not expect Elgium or Behemoth to learn it because they don't have wings, but they
sure
do.
don't.
It does learn Steelwing from TM, and people speculate it's because of Area 51 in TM51.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
That's
that's
kind of
pretty
neat. I'd
funny.
never actually heard that before.
Yeah.
Number 705 is Sliggoo.
I have
which
very
is-
unpleasant memories with this Pokemon because I love Gen 6. I played through it in the fall again, and it was really fun to play. And I wanted to use Goodra, so I had to evolve a Sliggoo, but you have to like find a route where it's raining and evolve it
and
there.
it's like the only route in the game where it rains, right?
Right. It was annoying to like find because it doesn't always rain either. It's random,
Ugh.
so you have to like wait for it to rain. It was not fun. These like random like Inkay to Malamar, it'll flip your DS upside down. Some of these like
those
weird evolution methods.
I think it's kind of cool, but
It's
that's,
cool,
I mean,
but like it's a
yeah,
little
that's
much.
kind of annoying
let's
to pull off.
let's
yeah.
dial it back.
And finally, number 805 is the most VGC relevant Pokemon of the week, and that is Stakataka. And I think we might end up talking about that in a little bit, but an important Pokemon that we've definitely discussed this season on the podcast, so
Yeah.
we're not going to spend too much time on that one. As we jump here into our Worlds coverage, and of course it did take place last weekend in Washington, D.C., and first and foremost, a big congratulations to our new World Championship in the VGC 2019 format, Naoto Mizobushi, who of course goes by Penguin online and had really a great run through the tournament. He was on stream in his play-in match to top 16, and I think in another 2 rounds, definitely in top 4 and then in finals, and I think he was on for top 16 or top 8, so he was on a whole bunch going into the world final there, so we got to watch him a lot, and he really just like piloted that team that he brought expertly. But we're going to get into that a little bit later. We'll spend plenty of time talking about some of these teams. And now that we've kind of turned the page on Worlds and we're not quite into the Sword Shield meta yet, we've got a couple months before it's released, we are into kind of an interesting post-Worlds meta, Jake, and we talked a little bit about this when we were getting ready for our episode this season, but there have been, in the past couple years, some really interesting post-Worlds metas. And the one that you definitely talk about, I know we've talked about it a couple times on the stream, is in our most recent GS Cup format.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 2016 I think is one of the really good examples of like a very distinct post-Worlds meta because the events at Worlds 2016 kind of opened people's eyes to different ways to build and play and different like team archetypes that you can use. And so like personally Reindeer was something that I fell in love with like the day of Worlds day 1 2016 or the night before I was very close to actually switching to Reindeer and using the team that Justin Karras used to get top 8. But I decided to stick with Sunny D. But right after Worlds, I switched over to using Reindeer almost exclusively, and it was super fun. And I think that popped up a lot more in post-Worlds 2016. You had a lot of people running, obviously, like Wolf Team clones. And then, I mean, there's a lot of other stuff that I think people decided to branch out more after Worlds, possibly knowing that the archetype was, the format was ending sooner rather than later. But I also think that people just realized that you weren't kind of restricted to using one of 3 different teams.
Right, and I think it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that, like, the thing about people realizing that the format's going to end, because I think there is kind of a lot of that in post-Worlds metagames where people are just like, I'm just going to, like, try and catch lightning in a bottle instead of, trying to play something that is an established archetype, maybe playing some sort of, still developing archetype or one that, people would expect to maybe have, like, a longer arc of development and just kind of, like, throw together 6 mons and see what happens, because especially because you can't really do a lot of metagame prep, right? Because it's so constantly evolving. So yeah, 16 post-Worlds meta. Post-Worlds meta in general, I know the other one that I think about a lot is 14.5, which is where we had move tutors that were introduced after Worlds. So that included, most notably, Hyper Voice Sylveon, which was
Yeah.
a super important Pokemon and went on to be a really big Kangaskhan partner for the next season and a half.
Yeah, I mean, if you played in 14.5, as we called it, I'm sure you either used or played against the one team that Keegan built, like
Right.
like it was like Charizard, Tyranitar, Sylveon, Conkeldurr,
Mm-hmm.
Aegislash, Mawile, I think were the six, something
That
like that.
sounds right.
Maybe not Aegislash. There was definitely, it was Charizard, Mawile, Conk, Sylveon.
Yeah, and it was something like that, and we saw a bunch of teams kind of like that in 2018 even.
Right. Yeah. No, but
And then
that was definitely huge. Like Gardevoir and Sylveon both got Hyper Voice. Like Zapdos got Tailwind, which was pretty important. A lot of like random Pokemon got moves they had been missing the entire time, and so it was a like the same meta, but also very different because certain Pokemon got insanely buffed.
right, yeah, and Sylveon, of course, the one that I
Yeah.
think most about and was a phenomenal Charizard partner. And the other post-Worlds meta, as I'm just thinking about it now before we move on, is 15 post-Worlds was like, oh right, Azumarill's a Pokemon.
Yeah.
Like all like Chalk dominates Worlds, and then they're like, it's a really good partner for Kangaskhan and Amoonguss.
Right.
Azumarill sure is, and
Yeah.
and I think Porygon 2 started to show up a lot post Worlds as well. So Worlds obviously, and I think this year was also kind of a good example of this. Really blows the meta wide open because people are trying as hard as possible for this one tournament, and then it just kind of like flips the whole, depending on what ends up doing well. And I would say that at this time that I feel like the meta was really blown open by Worlds this year.
No, I'm excited
anyway,
to see what happens. No, also,
yeah, definitely,
before we move on, I need to say justice for 2018 not getting a post-Worlds meta. I am very angry. I loved 2018. I want it back. We should move to 2018 now because we didn't get it before, and that is the hill I'm choosing to die on.
Well, Jake, I hate to break it to you, but there's not going to be a national dex in a couple months. So, 18
so yeah, we need to
dead.
use the national dex before it's gone.
So anyway, the first couple of events that are coming up in the post-Worlds meta that will give CP for the 2020 season are there are three regionals in September, and then one regional in October. And of course, there was one regional that took place this past weekend at Worlds, which was the DC Open that was run by a local of mine and a good friend, Jeremy Odena. So congratulations to him. He's the first regional winner of the season and is #1 in CP in the world, so good for him. The other upcoming events are Sheffield, which is in the UK from September 7th to 8th. Atlantic City is the first, or I guess the second North American regional, which takes place from September 28th to 29th. The Köln Regional is the EU on the same weekend, September 28th to 29th, and then Knoxville will take place in the US from October 11th through 13th. So those are the first couple events coming up, and we will look forward to the results of those in the post-Worlds meta. There were no results, and it probably would have been, the DC Open kind of flies under the radar with Worlds Weekend, and rightfully so we weren't really able to get results or teams for that. So if we do happen to come across them, we'll by all means throw them up during our next podcast. But for now, we're going to move on and talk about the World Championships.
Yeah. So one resource that we are using heavily for this podcast is Victory Road. They have.
I love Victory Road.
Oh, it's so good. They have every single team up from
Everything
day 2.
looks so good too.
Yeah, it's very aesthetically pleasing. Everything is well organized. Big shout out to Victory Road. We'll have the page we're looking at linked. But again, they have every single player in day 2 and the team they used and their record in Swiss, and so it's huge. You can even search by country, or you can search just for their names and everything. Great resource. But we're going to run through the top 8 teams and kind of discuss them at varying lengths. Obviously, we're going to start with the team that won the whole tournament. That is Naoto Mizubushi, and he is running Moon Series Lunadon pretty much. It's Groudon, Lunala, Mega Salamence, Tapu Fini, Incineroar, and Stakataka.
Yeah, Moon Series Lunadon with a Salamence, but otherwise it's like very, very similar. And I'm sure we'll talk about this team again over various points of the podcast here. But really, he just took our advice,
I think he's a listener.
Jake and I have been very vocal about our distaste for Lunadon on many forums. I yell at people in Discord. I yell at people on Twitter. We yell into the void on this podcast. And basically, we've just been saying, like, you got to find an Yveltal matchup. And
Right.
Naoto did that.
He did.
With his Twinkle Tackle Feeny and the Rockium Stakataka and the Colbur-Berry Lunala. He just was like, okay, this is a really strong 6 Pokemon, and I'm just going to tech for the Yveltal / Umbreon matchup.
Yeah, the Umbreon falling under the Yveltal umbrella. It's like
Right.
non-restricted Yveltal.
Pretty much.
Yeah, but no, like one of the things we had talked about when we were talking about Lunadon a couple episodes ago was that, like, it's a really good team if you can not auto lose to Yveltal. And I think one of that was kind of our final thought on the matter was that, like, if you can tech Lunadon for Yveltal, it'll be really good. And we were right. I just want to rub it in for a minute. We were definitely
yeah, we were
right.
totally right.
No, I think it's
beyond
super
right.
smart though. Like, not even just Colbur Lunala. It was really, really bulky. It had Wide Guard to block Snarl. It
Mhm.
had Trick Room, I believe, which gave the
Yep.
Groudon a speed advantage, and the Feeny a speed advantage against it. Obviously,
Yep.
Fairy and Feeny is huge against it. It was Moonblast and Nature's Madness, which are both
Yep.
like moves that you would want against Yveltal. So like
And
Nature's Madness into Moonblast would probably come very close to KOing, if not knock it out, because it's assumedly offensive Feeny.
mhm.
Scald, I'm not sure about.
Yeah, I was just gonna point that out. Is that apparently the third move was Scald?
Yeah.
And I was talking to a couple people about it, and we ended up just kind of speculating that like it's to hit the Incineroars when they're next to Kyogre, like
Right.
opposing Kyogre, and I was like,
Or like for
okay.
Radon or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Kind of a weird tech, but if you're
Yeah.
gonna have 2 offensive moves, you may as well just throw a third on there. Although,
Yeah, and
you know,
it's
I
not
guess
like
icy,
I guess like
icy
Ice
wind
Beam.
would have worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, we're gonna move on to the second place team. Of course, first place team super cool. Second place team also really cool. A lot
Yeah.
of cool stuff came out of Japan today with Hiroshi, as he goes by online, or Hirofumi Kimura, with a team of Groudon, Duskmane, Necrozma, Kangaskhan, Salamence, Tapu Lele, and that Umbreon that everybody was so excited to see.
The Umbreon made so much sense on his team too. Like the way he played it all weekend, it had like what I think is probably the optimal move set on it. Like obviously I haven't used Umbreon.
Does
and
it get
so
other moves? Well, I take
that's
that
a good
back.
question, actually.
We were talking. I was obviously in at the World Championships talking about sitting with people watching these matches, and I don't think Snarl was actually revealed on stream until the finals when he
Oh,
was
really?
playing against Naoto. So we were joking the whole time that it was Quick Attack Umbreon.
I was gonna say.
Every time something was at low health, we were like, "Oh my
Quick
god, he's
Attack.
gonna reveal Quick Attack."
I brought Quick Attack Sylveon to 2015 Nationals.
That was a cool tech. I liked that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, like Helping Hand is so good with Pokemon like Groudon and Lele that they
Mhm.
do a lot of damage on their own, but a lot of times like just not enough to make an impact. But if you have Helping Hand next to them, like especially with someone like Groudon that might get intimidated or Lele that might have its terrain reset, Helping
Mhm.
Hand is the same boost as like terrain, or it
Right, right.
it like mathematically negates one Intimidate, and so you like maintain the same damage output even though it may have been diminished at one point, or you would just increase it past the normal. And so, Helping Hand, I just love as a move. Brendan has joked before about writing fanfic of me and Helping Hand, and so
Oh yeah.
that was something I was very happy to see.
Yeah, it's funny because I think that the reference that I was making at that time that I made that joke was I remember in 2016 when you were playing against Franklin on stream, and I think you were using double primals and
Uh-huh.
he had Yveltal, and I was
Yeah.
like, "Ah, Jake, you have no matchup," and then you knocked out his Yveltal like twice with a Helping Hand boosted double edge and Fire Punch or
Yeah.
something like that. So it's funny
That's
because
exactly
this
right.
is like it's like the same exact situation on this team where he was using Helping Hand to
Yeah.
like patch an Yveltal matchup.
That's so funny. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, so obviously Umbreon was there for a lot of reasons, and
Mhm.
on stream, when he played against Kazuki Kobayashi, who was the highest placing Yveltal player in top 4 there, he basically would just like, and he did this in one game where he used it as a win condition against Yveltal.
Yeah.
Because I remember sitting there thinking like, he's not targeting Yveltal, like he can't knock it out, but he was able to knock out everything else, and then just let Umbreon take on Yveltal in the 1v1, which it would have eventually won because it has Moonlight.
Yeah.
So super neat tech, and it actually Umbreon ended up showing up on a couple of teams next to Necrozma Duskmane in day 2. So
Mhm.
apparently it was like kind of a thing, and you know we never saw it on ladder, I don't think, and somebody had mentioned it to me before Worlds that like, oh, there are good players that are using Umbreon at this
Yeah.
tournament, and I was like, shut up.
That's not true. I don't believe you. Yeah.
Shut up. And one last point about this team before we move on real quick is that it is the shining example of Japan's obsession with Necrozma Duskbane, apparently, because they had it all over the place on day 1 stream. It showed up in day 2. So really cool Pokemon. I think that's going to be one of the biggest meta impacts in the post-Worlds world, so to speak. But anyway, third place was the highest ranking North American player. Of course, James Beck did pilot that Moon Series team to a top 4 finish at Worlds.
Yeah, so I think a lot of people going into Worlds were looking for like a quote unquote solution to Ultra Series. I think that's kind of the end goal for a lot of people when they build for Worlds is like, this is the team that is the best in the format because I'm going to win the best tournament in the format with it. But like James and Naoto just looked back to Moon Series and they were like, hey, these teams worked here. I'm going to bring them to Worlds, and clearly it worked for them. Like, both of these teams are literally just Moon Series teams with, like, one major change. Being, like, the Salamence on Naoto's team and then Primal Ogre on James's.
Right. And just kind of one of those situations where, like, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is what James used to get top 8 or 16? 16 or 8 at NAIC? One of those two.
Yeah, well. And then he won regional, like, I think he won 2 regional championships with it this year, right? He definitely won at least one. Did he win 2 or just 1? Because he won Roundup.
I don't remember what he won his second with. No, he won Daytona with something else. There was a Gengar.
Oh, it was Yveltal Kyogre Gengar. Yeah, that's right.
So Kyogre
anyway, this was like pretty clearly his one love, and I think it's kind of interesting because I'm pretty sure that like a lot of the sets that he used were even the same as Moon Series. It's not like he took these Pokemon and gave them massive overhauls so that they function differently in Ultra Series. Like he could have been using like the same Xerneas spread, and just
like I'm sure it's still like Flyinium Torn and it's either Sash or AV Cart. Yeah,
and I think it might have been Sash Amoonguss.
Oh, okay,
if I remember it correctly.
Yeah.
But anyway, the final member of the top 4 at the World Championships was Kazuki Kobayashi, who piloted that team of Groudon, Yveltal, Metagross, Tapu Koko, Incineroar, and Mimikyu to a finish. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, I think, Jake. But this is one of those teams that I feel like did a really good job of predicting. And maybe not even predicting, but just being ready for what ended up being like a lot of the World's metagame.
I agree. No, I think this team has the tools for pretty much everything. I really like how Mimikyu has caught on because it really is kind of a catch-all as far as, you know, like its disguise is just a stupid good ability, and it has a really, really strong Z move and the Let's Snuggle Forever, and so it can take on a lot of things. I believe the Z move just straight up knocks out Xerneas and Fairy Aura.
I think most Xerneas.
Okay, yeah. And if it doesn't, you have Shadow Steel.
You have to be attack boosting. Yeah.
Right. And like obviously it'll knock out Yveltal. And like neither of these Pokemon can knock it out through disguise. And so it's a really cool kind of a Techmon to kind of give you a last out against a couple particular things. And I really like Metagross too. When I first saw Metagross catching on in Ultra Series, I didn't really understand it, but I think it gives a lot of teams like matchups it needs, especially now that it has Stomping Tantrum, because that specifically like it lets it beat a lot of things that otherwise wouldn't, like Stack Attack or like Incineroar.
Right, and it also gets Thunder Punch, which I think was seen at least one time on stream this past weekend, which gives it otherwise it doesn't have a Kyogre matchup other than Ironhead flinches.
Right.
So yeah, definitely a super interesting Pokemon, and so interesting that it showed up on the 5th place team as well as Megan Rattle, the only Australian member of Top Cut this year, piloted a team of Kyogre, Yveltal, Metagross, Tapu Koko, Incineroar, and Amoonguss to a top 8 finish. And again, another team, a lot of the same Pokemon. I think I like the Mimikyu in the last slot a little bit better than Amoonguss, but definitely like very prepared for what was going to be here at Worlds. And kind of an interesting thing, just I'm recalling at this moment when you were talking about Metagross, is she made a cool play in I think game 2 of her top 8 set, where she was like I thought completely outled. I think James led like Groudon's freaking Xerneas Incineroar into like Yveltal and like Tapu Koko or something like that, which is like, oh okay, free Geomancy. And then she set up Tailwind with Yveltal and switched in Metagross. on turn 1, and I was like,
Oh,
wow,
yeah.
that's like actually really cool. And she just like totally flipped the position, and that was the game that she ended up winning.
Mhm.
Because I like on stream, James like fist pumped when he caught the lead, and
Yeah.
he
She
led
was
to
like, "No, no,
Groudon
no."
Zerny. Yeah, yeah, and she was like, nope.
That's really
Um,
cool. Yeah. I don't think that's a set that I was able to watch, and so uh,
yeah, that was a neat one.
this is the same team as Kazuki's essentially, but with Ogre and Mungus instead
Yeah,
of
it's just like the ogre version
Groudon
of it. Yeah,
Mimikyu. Yeah.
right.
And I do like Mimikyu on Kazuki's team, but I think that Amoonguss makes a lot of sense on Megan's because
Mm-hmm.
you take their Groudon and make it an Ogre, and suddenly you're like really weak to Coco, and then the Amoonguss really helps that out. And so, like Amoonguss is also a better defensive check to Xerneas than Mimikyu is, and so I
Right.
really like the Amoonguss swap there. I think if I was to use one of these two teams, or rather, if I was to use the Ogre version of this team, it would definitely be with Amoonguss over Mimikyu.
Yeah,
But
I think that makes some sense. Yeah.
yeah,
Right. And at 6th and 7th were the two Spanish top 8 players with the exact same team. And for anybody that ladders, Alex Gomez, who finished 6th, did admit that this was he was the owner of the infamous ladder ult RURIWWWW. I don't know how to pronounce that, but I remember that was kind of a big thing where everybody was like, "Oh my God,
right.
it's him! That's
Yeah,
who it was the
I
whole
think it was
time."
both of them actually. I think he
Yeah, I
tweeted
think
that they
they
both used
co-owned
it.
it.
Yeah.
Right. So of course 6th and 7th were Alex Gomez and Eric Rios, two friends from Spain who were able to both finish in the top 8, which is kind of a really cool story in my
Yeah.
opinion. And they were running the what people were saying maybe the best Rayogre team in the format that did feature Kyogre, Rayquaza, that is a Tapu Koko, Incineroar, Nihilego, and Kartana, which actually had 3 placements in the top 8 after not really being so much of a factor in Ultra Series for most of the year.
Yeah, it kind of went away as soon as Ultra Series started, and then slowly started to trickle back in. Obviously, 3 placements in top 8 is very, very good, and so a
Mm.
strong Pokemon. But I like this is a really cool team. I think by now you know that I like Nihilego a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Never
do
stopped
too.
talking about it, and so I think it's great to see on this team, and I believe it was Sash Trick Room, which I think is a pretty neat option for this team.
Yeah,
Like,
it was. Yeah.
Nihilego in this format, I don't think has ever run Trick Room. Like in 2017, you would often see it like a bulky berry set with Trick Room.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, it's usually been like Sludge Bomb, Power Gem, and then like Clear Smog or Sub or something. And so the Trick Room option really cool for this team because I think Ogre enjoys having a Trick Room option a lot of times.
Oh,
Like a lot of
100%
against
agree. Yeah.
against like faster teams, like Ogre and Trick Room just kind of wins
Yeah.
a lot of the time.
Ogre and Trick Room with Ray in the back is just like
Yeah.
beyond scary. There's just like not a lot of stuff that can switch you into it.
No.
And then you get to a point where like you know, Groudon is trying to catch your mind game, and you can just like stay in and spout and get the full water boosted thing. If it's just like a whole. It's really scary, hard to
Yeah.
beat. And I remember at least once I saw Eric play that kind of mode on stream, which was really cool. Super cool team.
Hmm.
And I think Nihilego kind of takes the spot of, and we've talked about it on this podcast, where you see like Stack Attack a Bronzong on those teams a lot,
Right.
and it almost does the same thing, right? It sets Trick Room and then is like an offensive threat to Xerneas. Because you can give yourself a lot of momentum by leading Nihilego into Xerneas and then just setting Trick Room instead of trying to attack it, because no Xerneas is going to leave itself open to like an attack from Nihilego on turn 1, right?
Yeah.
So you set Trick Room, you get your Kyogre on the board, and then Xerneas is like, okay, fine, like, what is it going to do now?
Well, what now? Yeah.
Yeah, so really scary option and super well played by both of them. Super cool team, I think.
Yeah, and I
they
think it's a
were
really
able to
cool
put
story
together.
too because the last time either of them cut
Oh,
worlds
that's
was
right. It was in seniors. Yeah, that
yeah
was
in
neat.
seniors in 2014 they both cut worlds in Washington D.C. and I think
they
they've
both
both
finished
had
top 8, right?
that sounds right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like every year since then, I believe they've both played in day 2 every year, whether
Mhm.
that's making it through day 1 or just having the day 2 invite. And
Mhm.
neither of them have been able to cut again, but they both did this year in the same place where they had the last one, and they did it together again, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, super cool story. And I think they were featured by a couple of news outlets in Spain too.
That's
I saw somebody
awesome. Yeah.
somebody retweet some sort of article that somebody had written about them, which was really neat and well deserved too.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, one of those stories that you really get excited about in the community. And to round out top 8, was Stephen Mia, who is also kind of an interesting story because he's running the same team as James. They're some from the same area in the U.S. Probably did a lot of their team building together, but Stephen
Mhm.
kind of like independently decided that he was not going to take a Moon Series team and used Kangaskhan in the Kartana slot. So
Right.
a little bit of a different dynamic there. Of course, it brings a mega Pokemon to the team and arguably kind of creates a stronger Xerneas mode. right? So you can
Right.
feasibly bring like both Fake Outs and Amoonguss to some matchup and be threatening just a full Zern sweep mode.
Yeah, I think this is the like reindeer team that I was picturing in my head, like leading up to Worlds. I might have even said it like on this podcast, but I think this six, the Zernogre, Kang, Ensign, Torn, Amoonguss, that's
Mm-hmm.
something I had played with just for fun. I had no tournaments to go to or anything, but I just built this team for fun. Thought it was pretty cool. Obviously hadn't optimized it or anything, but I'm sure that Steven was using like what he deemed were the best sets, and I would default to him certainly because he did just top 8 worlds, and I have not come anywhere close to that.
Yeah, and I I might have talked about him on this podcast before, but I've played Steven a couple of times, and he's one of those just like I think we fondly refer to them as crackhead players in the community, where he will just like never click protect, like constantly make hard reads, and it's like
Mhm.
unnerving to play against. And I think I like have a positive record against him just because I've like taken like borderline unlosable matchups where
Oh
like
yeah.
he still takes me to a game 3 and is like
Uh-huh.
making hard reads and everything like that. So he's an awesome player
Yeah.
and really one of like the fastest risers in the Masters division, I would
Yeah.
argue. Just like kind of a meteoric rise. He won a regional championship this year, and definitely a player to look out for.
Mhm.
For sure. So that rounds out the top 8 here, and now we're just kind of Jake and I have a whole bunch of things kind of written down that we really want to talk about. And we touched on a bunch of them as we kind of went through the top 8 teams here. So we're just kind of riff a little bit here, and I think that'll be fun.
Right.
That'll be fun.
I think one conversation that always comes up post Worlds is, who's the best player of all time, and
Hmm.
does the results of this last Worlds affect that? And I think that happens every year. And so we figured we may as well just tackle that right away. Obviously, people like, Wolf, Ray, Sejun, Vieira, these are all names that like would
Hmm.
certainly contend for that title, and so most of them not really showing up at Worlds. Wolf coming a game away from making top cut, but
In a wild set on
yeah,
stream.
that was fun. But like like having one off tournament obviously doesn't knock you down like a certain amount of pegs, but it's interesting to think about how people that performed well at this Worlds might start rising on that list.
Yeah, I think it's a super interesting conversation. And um, just to touch on Wolf briefly, I think he's pretty
Mm.
like a consensus second best player in the world, and I think at this point it would be pretty tough to take that away from him, barring
Yeah.
like a second world championship for anybody that you might put up in the top 5 to 10 there. But I think it's interesting to talk about the two finalists from Japan this year,
Yeah.
where Penguin had his first world championship this year, and of course he has top forward worlds back in 2015, I
Correct.
believe.
Yep.
And that is, already a pretty unique resume to say that you've top forward worlds twice, and one of those times was a world championship. So I
Yeah.
think you could definitely put him in the conversation. I mean, I think you should put any world championship in the
Absolutely.
conversation
Yeah.
of
Winning
a top
Worlds is
10 worlds
no
all
small
time.
feat at all.
Right,
uh,
and I was talking to who was it? Oh, it was Caleb on the ride back. We were kind of discussing this a little bit, and we were talking about how like all of the world championships that we've had in this game, like there are no Cinderella world champions, right? Everybody that's won a world championship, with the exception of maybe Arash, but he ended up kind of going back and padding his resume,
mhm.
is one of the best world championships or one of the best players of all time. There's nobody like, oh, Brendan Lewis won a world championship, but
Right.
he's not actually that good. He just like caught lightning in a bottle, made a really good team call or something like that. So
No, that's a really good point.
interesting discussion.
Mm-hmm. And I believe that Penguin also top four at Japan Nats this year, and so it's not like he's like Worlds is the only tournament he does well at. It clearly has
Right, right.
success at home as well. But speaking of Japan Nats, the finalist from Worlds this year has won the last two, which is a
Mhm.
huge accomplishment. Obviously, winning one national championship is big. Not many people can say they've done that, but even fewer people can say they've won more than one, which Hiroshi can't do. And he almost added a world championship to his trophy case too, and so I think he also has a pretty strong case for making that top 10 or top 5, especially in the recent years.
Yeah, absolutely. And like to win Japan Nats twice is it's not like winning back-to-back regionals. You have to run through best of 1
Yeah,
before you get to an actual best of 3 bracket in the top cut, which is like you have to navigate hacks, and like obviously
yeah.
Japan is well known for running those like Mimi best of 1 teams.
Hmm.
So you have to like have those tricks up your sleeve, but also be able to play in a best of three. So, like, I would say that it's probably the hardest maybe arguably the hardest tournament.
Certainly up there, yeah. I
Because
think
of
one of the cool things about Hiroshi's run through both of his Japan Nats wins and Worlds this year is that each time he had like one really random Pokemon on his team. Like 2018, he had the
how do you
Nidoqueen.
call Umbreon random?
I am. I'm definitely calling Umbreon random. But he had Nidoqueen on his team in 2018. He had the Gastrodon
Right.
on his team this year at Nationals, and
Yep.
then the Umbreon this year at Worlds. And
Hmm.
those are not Pokemon you would have ever expected to perform well at these events. But when you look at the teams they were on, they were just perfect. And
Yep.
so I
And
really respect the way that he can find these Pokemon that can patch these matchups in such a good way, and like the teams just seem seamless for the most
yeah,
part.
it really does seem that way, and I think that watching him play Umbreon on stream at Worlds was definitely a testament to that. But on
Mm-hmm.
the flip side, he is also giving a lot of weight to the win with your favorites crowd that had died down a
Yeah.
little bit since Pachirisu won
Yeah,
in
I'm not sure I can.
2014.
I'm not sure I can tolerate that. You might have
Yeah,
to
and
calm
then
down
all
there,
of a
Hiroshi.
sudden we have to watch eject button sturdy Togedemaru win Worlds in the senior division, and then Umbreon
Yeah.
take itself to the finals, and now we have to
Oh
listen
no.
to all you got to do is bring your favorite to the tournament, guys. Like if you believe in the heart of the cards, you can beat anybody. You can be a world champion.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God! And speaking of Pachirisu, Pachirisu was actually at the tournament.
Yeah, it
Uh,
was.
in our favorite archetype, Jake.
Oh,
And
I'm so
yeah.
happy.
It was on as the Como replacement for those Xerneas Groudon, Kangaskhan, Tornadus. I think
Mm-hmm.
Incineroar was the fifth Pokemon. And I actually talked to Yuri about it, Alessio Yuri's Boschetto, who I believe built or added that Pokemon to the slot at the recommendation of Zach Drakamp.
Yep.
So I got to talk to him about it, and he was like adamant that it was good after going 1-3 drop. He was like, it was really good. Like it did everything that I wanted it to. It's way better than a Mungus in that slot. It's way better than Como in that slot. And I was like,
I'm
wow,
almost
that's
things
really interesting. Like you're really gonna die on this hill. And the other funny thing is that it was all over the Boston Open too, because he had like I guess passed that to some of the Italians, and Zach
Oh,
himself
yeah.
was playing in the Boston
Mhm.
or DC Open rather, not
Same
Boston
thing.
Open. Jesus.
Every post Worlds
Anyway.
regional is Boston Open.
So Yuri was really like out here trying to get Pachirisu at second world championship, and like God forbid.
Yeah, just when we thought that team couldn't get worse, it somehow did. I understand why Como is on that team. I still think it's garbage, but like I get it. But like Pachirisu, it made sense. Okay, in 2014 it made sense. Like I liked it on Sajan's team in 2014.
Mhm.
I don't really think electric types are such a huge issue for Kangtorn in 2019 that
Right.
you really need Follow Me Volt Absorb. If you
Mhm.
wanted to use Follow Me over Rage Powder, I think that's fine.
Mhm.
Maybe like Togekiss or something. Like at least you
Clef,
can like
yeah.
Tailwind Air Slash stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't follow.
I would have to go back and ask him about, because he was like talking about how like it was like definitely something for Coco, like some specific team like Coco Ray Ogre or something like that they
Yeah.
really needed it for, and that was the matchup that everybody was trying to patch. So anyway, yeah, Pachirisu was really be out here, but
Really
wasn't
be out
the
here.
electric rodent to place this year after Togedemaru won Senior Worlds. But that was really cool. That was neat. That was a super good stream match.
Mhm.
Sometimes you kind of miss the mark on like senior stream matches, but that was awesome.
Yeah. One thing, while we're still kind of on the topic, I would like to say there's only one Como in day 2, and it went 2-5. And
Thank
so,
God.
no disrespect to the person using it, but I'm very glad that Como itself crashed and burned. Because
Thank-
otherwise, I would have had to eat a lot of my words.
Thank God. Ugh. All
That
right,
kind
one
of brings
the
up
other-
something else I wanted to talk about, though, is like, a lot of times a lot of people try to pull out something wild for Worlds.
Mhm.
And like a lot of people did again this year. But if
They
you
sure
look
did.
at the day 2 results, a lot of people that tried to use that wild stuff just completely crashed and burned.
Yeah, and kind of in a couple of scenarios, and I think Ray Hoa was on stream twice in day 1, like in back-to-back rounds, and lost both rounds, and then also kind of like apparently got into day 2 and then didn't really make any noise there. I think there were some Rayquaza Eviltal. I'd have to go look at the list and see where those ranked, but it
Hmm.
wasn't highly. I'll tell you that. Let's see. I'm scrolling,
Of all the teams in Top Cut, of all 18
scrolling,
teams, there were only
scrolling. I don't
7
even
different
see it.
restricteds.
Yeah. Oh, here it is. 69. Oh, it's Javier Valdez who run Rayquaza Yveltal. That's not surprising. That seems
Yeah.
like something he would run. But a little more surprising is that Ashton Cox and Jeremy Rodriguez, who were day 2 qualifiers from the
Hmm.
U.S. or from North America, kind of renowned for their team building in this format. Um, because they put together that Xerneas Lunala team that kind of like took over Late Sun and Moon
Hmm.
series, and then Ashton was uh, like I associate him most with the standard Xerneas Groudon 6 with like Phineas, Mungus, Salamence, Incineroar, which is
Yeah.
obviously a strong team. And then they came out here and took Xerneas Solgaleo to Worlds.
Lunala
Like,
Sokoleo.
sorry, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Lunala Solgaleo. Talk about Yveltal matchups, but like Ashton ended up going 0-3, and I think Jeremy took 3 wins before he ended it. What did he go? 3-4.
3-4, yeah, or 3-3
3-4.
maybe.
Yeah. Um, so like super interesting team call. I'd be super interested to talk to them about it, but it really looks bad in hindsight to bring that restricted combination and then get 3 wins between the two of you.
Yeah, I think they both of them just have trouble at Worlds in general. It's
Mhm.
weird because they're obviously great players and they have success on the international stage. They both have won internets before. Ashton with 2 and Jeremy with
Yep.
1. So it's
Yep.
not like they can't play against the best people in the world because they have and done it successfully. But
Mhm.
something about Worlds, I don't know if we were talking about this in a group chat I was in either earlier today or the other day. But I think a lot of times people like bulk down for Worlds and are using teams that are more flexible defensively, and a lot of
Mhm.
times that disrupts their more like super offensive playstyle. So that could be something that has to do with it. Obviously, they're both known for being more aggressive as opposed to like conservative when it comes to building and playing. And
Uh-huh.
something sometimes that's just not sustainable in certain tournaments and certain fields. And maybe that's a trend that persists. Like I know Ashton got top 16 back in 2014 at Worlds. I don't think he's done better than that, and I don't think Jeremy has cracked top 16 at Worlds ever. And
Right.
so, just it's a really weird phenomenon that is consistently happening. Like both of them had day 2 invites this year and last year, and both of them have
Mhm.
kind of failed to make a splash both
Well, I
years.
think there's a couple of situations where Worlds is kind of like the monkey on the backs of a whole bunch of players. I think PokeAlex was a really good. He was talking about it a lot in some of his stream interviews, and then he talked about it on Twitter. I think where it's one thing to go out there and just kind of like dominate some of the second and third tier of
Right.
tournaments, but like to be such a good, consistent player and then consistently not be able to make it into cut of Worlds is like definitely something that I think happens to a lot of players. I don't have anything more than like kind of anecdotal evidence to present on
Hmm.
that front, but and in a sense it makes sense, kind of like you said. Not necessarily that like these are the players that I don't want to say like
Right.
yeah, oh I obviously expected Ashton and Jeremy to bomb. No, no,
Right.
no.
Right. Right. Right.
But like the fact that it is a phenomenon that players don't necessarily do it well at Worlds makes sense. It's like a completely different stage.
No, for sure. Now, if we're talking about like really good players that don't do well at Worlds, I'm sitting right here. Like, hello.
Hi,
I've
Jake.
been I've played in I've played in 3 Worlds and I have a total of 3 wins there. So,
At least you're consistent.
despite all of my success elsewhere, the vast number of trophies I have sitting in my room, I
Yep.
just can't seem to do well at Worlds, and it's really annoying because I
You'll
win
get it.
everything else.
You'll get it. You got your you got your NAIC monkey off your back last year, right?
There we go. Yeah,
And now you just gotta qualify for Worlds, and then you can do that too.
this is my year.
There you go. You got this. Um, another thing I wanted to talk about is some of the really cool move techs that we saw, and I think a lot of them came out of Japan most interestingly, which is kind of par for the course. I think we see
Hmm.
them kind of do that a lot more than we do, where everybody wants to build like a nice solid team with like safe moves and doesn't necessarily want to like be that guy that you know runs Thunderbolt on Groudon or something like that, regardless of whether or not it's maybe a good tech for your team. And specifically, the thing that showed up and like in top 4, and I think it's really interesting, is that Japan really like bulked up on the anti-Rayquaza techs, right? So
Hmm.
there were 3 Groudon in top 4, and of course 2 of them met in finals. Both of the Groudon in top 4 had Dragon Claw, and
Yeah,
the other one in top 4 that would have been on the
Kazuki's team.
Groudon Yveltal
Yeah,
team had Hidden Power Ice.
yeah,
So these players were like more than ready to be like taking pot shots at Rayquaza and Salamence, and I think the best example that we saw of its success, I think there was a Salamence that got Dragon Clawed in finals, but we saw Wolf get knocked out in the last round of day 2 by Dragon Claw Groudon. So it kind of goes to show that, you can throw, an Umbreon onto your team, and, that's good too, but you can also really, like, change matchups a lot just by using, like, a 4th move tech.
Yeah, this is really, like, if you had asked me before Worlds what Pokemon I would put money on winning, I would have said Rayquaza, like, hands down.
No, I would have too, absolutely.
Yeah, and so I think it's, like, super smart of these players to, like, run Groudon, which typically has just a god-awful Ray matchup, and it all of a sudden kind of turn it on its head. A lot of times Ray will run, like, Earth Power to hit Groudon, but it usually doesn't knock it out, and so if you can get them within range of a Dragon Claw, I think Dragon Claw is a bit smarter than Hidden Power Ice just because of Delta Stream. But obviously you have to work around Intimidate too, and so there's merits to both. Right. But like if you can get Ray into a position where it either can't knock out Groudon or it ignores Groudon because it thinks it can't touch it, you can just surprise it with a Dragon Claw, and suddenly it's either knocked out or down to like 20%. And so it's a super smart tech, especially now that Groudon doesn't really rely on its like setup moves anymore. A lot of times towards the end of 2016, around Worlds time, the Groudon were all running Swords Dance, which was great back then, but it meant that you didn't really have a move slot for a tech move. You would always run Fire Punch and Precipice Blades. And now that I was talking about this in a different group the other day, a lot of teams just don't have the time to set up these like setup moves like Swords Dance anymore, because Pokemon like Incineroar and Tapu Fini are so good at slowing games down that like setup moves a lot of times just aren't worth it. And when you can take these damage with big moves like Precipice Blades, you're more often better off going for that. So a lot of times you just forgo Swords Dance and you can run like Sub or obviously Dragon Claw, Hidden Power Ice, something like that. And I think the flexibility that you gain from not locking yourself into something like Swords Dance with a Groudon means that you can cover a lot more things that would have otherwise go like unchecked.
No, I totally agree, and end up being a great. I think I totally agree with your logic in the sense that, like, yeah, maybe not Swords Dance, and we'll start to look at these other things, but obviously they made a really good choice as far as like what to go with for the other things. You could have easily gone with something like, Eruption is what we that mixed Groudon, which I'm still in love with, by the way. But obviously you have to consider other techs.
Right.
But like Dragon Claw and then Hidden Power Ice, like spot on as far as what ended up being really big in the world's meta. Let's see. What else do we want to talk about here? Zerndon. I think we talked about this in our pre-Worlds episode where we were kind of like, yeah, I think that obviously it's a strong archetype. It's a strong restricted combination. But we really feel like you're going to need to like innovate the archetype a little bit if you want to see it go anywhere.
Right.
Well, guess what? Nobody except for Edu, I will caveat that. Besides Edu, nobody innovated the archetype. It was like it's pretty much exactly the same as it's been all season. Like Brandon Meckley, who had a good run through the U.S., threw a Venusaur on there. But other than that, Shedinja is effectively a core member of Xerneas Groudon at this point.
Yeah, Shedinja was on the top 2 placing Zerndon teams. It was Melvin, obviously. Like, hello, Melvin's going to cut this thing. And then Ken, who
had an unreal run the whole weekend.
Oh yeah, playing super well all day.
Yeah.
He had to play through day 1 too, and I think he
did. Yeah, I think he went undefeated, right?
Yeah, he stomped through it. Yeah. So really cool to see him do well. I think he said that this was, or he's moving back to China soon, so it was one of his last tournaments in the U.S. for a long time. So really cool to see him do well there. But like you said, like Shedinja is now established itself as a staple on Zerndon, which is not the direction we were talking about, everyone.
Melvin was right the whole time.
It's weird though, because like they had the same 6 other than Ken using Coco instead of Fini, and so that eliminates the soak option, and so the Shedinja on that team is like less of a win con and more of like, I'm probably going to click ally switch a few times and
I was going to say more of an ally switcher. Yeah. Definitely. So I thought that was kind of funny, and of course there were a couple, like Edu had Aerodactyl, so I'll apologize to Lee Provost. He was right, he nailed it.
I'd like to issue a formal apology to Lee Provost.
Yeah, if he had talked with Edu before the tournament, but there was one Aerodactyl in day 2 and it ended up doing pretty well and was run by a phenomenal player, so there was some merit to that. And I think Edu said on Twitter that it was actually like super good. But he didn't get that many rock slide flinches.
Do you know what set it was? Like, it has rock slide. I know it showed wide guard on stream, but I don't think I
think he said he had Iron Head.
Oh.
Yeah. So like Tough Claws Iron Head into Xerneas, I guess, was like a like something for some, and I assume it was wide guard tailwind. I'm pretty sure that's what it was.
It definitely had wide guard. He showed it,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. So cool Pokemon. Zerndon overall though, not really a great showing, and it's not even like what ended up placing well was necessarily reflective of that. Like Groudon Lunala doesn't like necessarily have like a invincible matchup against that, right? Maybe it's
Right.
slightly positive. Maybe like Ultra Necrozma Groudon is slightly positive, but like Xerneas Kyogre, Yveltal Groudon, like all these are all things that you would think that Xerneas Groudon would match up fine against, but it just like it didn't age as well as some of these other archetypes did.
Yeah, it's weird. I guess the people that had been running Zerndon had opted to either switch to something else. Like obviously Melvin stuck to his guns, and I think Ken had been using Zerndon all year, and so
Yeah, he has.
those are
yeah.
two we would expect. And like either decided to do something new with it. I think it's pretty cool. Like looking at his team, I can see where Aerodactyl would make sense on it, and so pretty neat team from him as well. But otherwise, like just not a lot of Zerndon. There was another in top 16 piloted by a Japanese player named Ryusei Yamane. It was essentially like King Torn Zerndon, but with Incineroar.
Yeah, it was like cookie cutter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess
And
that's
then-
actually just King Torn Zerndon with Incineroar. I don't know what I was trying to compare it to there.
Right.
And then Brandon,
even
like
it-
you said, had the Venusaur, which was a fun tech. But otherwise, like, there were a couple in top 32, like Emilio and David.
Yeah, a couple in day 2, but all of them are like just cookie cutter.
Yeah.
There's not anything. Oh, what's this? Gengar, Como, Crobat. Okay, fine. There's a. Oh, this was Yuri. With the Pachirisu. Okay, so like, I mean, like, I guess there was an attempt. Is I guess like gold star
Yeah.
for trying.
Yeah. I guess
To
there was
those
an
of you that
attempt,
did,
but
no gold star to people that just recycled the same team that's been around the entire year.
Right. But I mean, the people that did that did better, so I don't know if we can really fault them.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I guess it depends on how much you call how much you consider Shedinja to really be like cookie cutter Zerndon at this point.
Like it is though, is the thing.
It is,
And I
is.
hate it.
Yeah. All right. What
A
else
world
is
where
on it?
Shedinja is standard.
Yeah.
You
Here we
ever-
are.
Oliver
maybe,
Valenti is crying tears of happiness right now, I'm sure. All
Yeah,
of you
if
for
there's, like,
listening, I'm happy
if-
for you.
If Yveltal and Lunala are going to start to be like more of a thing, although I guess like certain Shedinja sets actually match up really well against Lunala, which is really funny.
No, that was the
but-
thing. Like when I ran
Yeah,
Shedinja
Shadow Claw
Dallas,
into Shadow Sneak. Yeah.
yeah, that was like people were saying in Boiler, but like before that tournament when Oliver was preaching this team and I started catching on. We were
Yeah.
like, well, how'd you just lose to Lunala? And we were like, no, Shedinja's a Lunala counter, everyone.
Yeah.
Like, the funny
Certain
thing is that's
sets
not
are.
wrong. Yeah,
Like,
if you have
it's
like
a
Shadow
conditional
Claw,
Lunala counter, but yeah.
well, yeah, Shadow Claw plus Shadow Sneak beats Lunala, which I find hilarious.
Yeah, and then I think the last thing that I wanted to touch on here, if I'm effectively perusing our list, is we just wanted to kind of, and I'm sure they'll be okay with us doing this, is revisit the expert panel article, who, made a lot of good points. Lee caught the Aerodactyl. I think Gabby was the one that made the point about day 1 and day 2 teams maybe being a little bit different. I thought that ended up being kind of an interesting point. But their power rankings, like, woo, whiffed
Yeah.
big time on the power rankings. I think, did they have Zern Ogre at number 5?
They did, yeah.
So that was the only correct for top 4 worlds, right? And then the only other thing that they got was 2 Ray Ogre in top 8, but no Zerndon in top 8.
And no Ray
no
Solak,
Soul
no
Ray,
Ray
like
Solak,
hardly
no Ray
anywhere
Solak.
in top 8. Yeah, and
No, I
then
mean, not even close to time. Not in top 16
right.
either.
And then X-Ray didn't. What was the highest placing X-Ray?
Oh gosh.
Scroll. 28th, John
Yeah.
Paul Lopez. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
geez,
so the one that cut NAIC with that makes sense.
Yeah, so big time whiff on that.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned that like we felt like it was maybe a little bit aggressive to try and just like jump those archetypes over stuff like Yveltal and Lunala stuff. Like it jumped XL, which didn't have a great placing, but
No. 10. Well, it got 10th.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, Gabriel
Oh,
Agati.
okay. Oh, that's right. Well, yeah, he's been running that the whole season though. XL Ditto. He's been
Yeah.
running that since Sun Series, I think. But yeah, kind of the power rankings were definitely off, and I know Justin ended up bringing Solgaleo Rayquaza himself, so maybe that's why that ended up on the list. Is Justin was like, guys, I have the World's Call. Like, you're gonna want this up there. So maybe that was it. But yeah, like of course, like the two archetypes in finals like didn't even get a mention in the article.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think selfishly, I was glad that Racehulk didn't really do well because it was vindicating for us.
Yeah.
Those are like my big takeaways from Worlds. My wins from Worlds are that Como did nothing and that Racehulk did nothing. So I'm walking away a winner, if you ask me.
You're
Uh,
always a winner in my book,
oh,
Jake.
thank you. But no, I do like I did expect it to do well, and I like expected to have to eat my words, and so I don't think the article was like misplaced trust in certain archetypes at all because I
Hmm.
think it was a fair call going into Worlds. But I think it probably got a little bit less play than people were expecting. Like you
Hmm.
said, Justin used it, and I think Alex Underhill
Alex
also
Underhill
used
had it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were a couple like Ray NDMs too. Like no, Jamie had Xerneas. Uh,
Yeah, but Ray NDM is like totally different.
then Ray Solok barely.
Well, I mean, because your NDM can be ultra, like
Right.
that is
Okay.
a
Fair.
big,
Yeah.
like that really flips the whole archetype on its head. I'm not sure. I would have to go back and I know Jamie had Zern and he was ultra,
Yeah,
but
he
I'd have to
was.
go back and like look to see what of the other NDMs, which Japan used a lot. Like they,
Yeah,
especially
we
in day
know.
one, like
Yeah.
NDM was like a big Japan thing apparently, at least through day one.
Hmm.
And I think it used like Berry on stream, and there was like a Solganium.
We at least know Hirosi's was ultra.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, but it had Trick Room, which was neat. So anyway,
Yeah.
cool Pokemon. But yeah, the point being that um, the article a little off, but created like a lot of good storylines. Looking at the article in
Hmm.
hindsight. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was really neat to see someone like the Rogue picks do well, like the Aerodactyl that
Hmm.
we mentioned from Lee. That was probably one of the weirdest things that we saw in the article going in, but clearly he knew something we didn't. So, yeah, there were some like
Yeah,
some
I
good
wonder if
calls, some
he
shaky
just
calls.
must talk to Edu.
Maybe, yeah, I could
Yeah.
see that.
All right. So I think before I step on your toes, Jake, anything else you want to throw at the end? I don't know.
Well,
I think
you
I
always
caught it.
step on my toes, but in this
Oh, and I'm
case, you
gonna
have
keep
not.
stepping on your toes.
Ugh,
Um,
I quit.
so yeah, that's it for our worlds coverage. I feel like we were able to kind of cover a lot of the storylines, at least from day two.
Hmm.
Talk a little bit about some of the stuff that showed up on day one, but it's kind of tough to get a sense until some super sleuth ends up getting a lot of teams that maybe did well on day one. To kind of like speak to it because it's such a big tournament and so many
Right.
people are running so many different things. But day two obviously does manage to capture a lot of what the world's meta was. So I think
Yeah.
we touched on a lot of some cool stuff that ended up showing up at Worlds. And then
Yep.
again, get ready for post Worlds, which is always really
Yay!
exciting. And we alluded to it a little bit, but the Worlds meta is just blew it open. And I think comparing the article with the results is a good example of that. That everybody was expecting like this meta. Here are these 5 teams, and guess what? All these things out of left field, and we've got that and even more to look forward to in post
I'm very
Worlds.
excited. Post Worlds metas are always really fun. They're also very weird, which I think is a little bit endearing just because, like, not to beat a dead horse, but it's just so different from what you would experience right before Worlds. And it's
Right?
just
Yeah,
funny
yeah,
how 1 week can kind of flip an entire format on its head.
definitely. All right, so we'll wrap the Worlds coverage up there, and we are going to kind of omit some of the games that we usually play because this is kind of a special episode, and we wanted to spend some more dedicated time actually like talking about things instead of joking about them. But look forward to some of the games that we usually play on our show when we do bring back guests with our more like regular content going
Hmm.
forward through episode 6 and
Yeah.
beyond here.
You
But we
know that I
will.
couldn't let an episode end without sneaking in some music, though. I.
I almost forgot.
How dare you, Brendan?
Again, I
How
almost forgot.
dare you? It's okay, because I'll never forget, because I love music more than a person should. So, my
I
music
thought you were gonna say you
recommendation.
love music more than me, and I was.
Well, also true. Yeah,
No,
I'm
just don't tell
glad.
me. Just I don't need to. Just don't say it.
Too late.
Let me preserve the illusion.
Oh well. Anyway, my music recommendation this week was a bit of serendipity because as I was driving home from work today, I opened Spotify and I got an alert for a new album that had come out from a band called Friendly Fires. They had a song called Love Like Waves that Blake pointed out to me like a couple months ago. And I really liked the song a lot and hadn't really thought much of the band since then. But I got that alert and I listened to the album a couple times on my way home and as I was making dinner today. And I really like it. And so the album is called Inflorescent, like fluorescent lighting, but with an N in front of it, so Inflorescent. And the band
I
is
get it.
Friendly Fires. And my favorite song is Love Like Waves.
Cool. I will listen to that. I don't think I've ever even heard of the band, but
I
anyway,
hadn't either until Blake showed me them, yeah.
I know that you've heard of the band that I'm going to talk about, and the band is called Small Pools,
Yay!
and I like had a crazy epiphany about them when I started listening to them a little bit more a couple months ago. There's this band that I used to listen to like sophomore year of high school when I used to just like play punk rock and like get my feels in bed every night. You've all been there. We've all been there. Okay, don't like.
No, for sure.
Jake only gave a little chuckle and didn't laugh harder because he's been there too.
Absolutely.
But anyway, Small Pools. There was this band called Making April that I used to listen to years ago, and it was really cool. It's like a piano rock band, and they had some cool songs and like some quirky lyrics. And I was listening to Small Pools, and I was listening, and then like I had listened to them for a couple weeks before I was listening to I forget what song it was, and I was like, this guy's voice is like really familiar, and I wasn't able to put my finger on it until I was like, oh my god, it's Making April. It's the same guy, and I googled it, and I was like, oh my god, it actually is. It's the same guy. So I got really excited about that, and like felt like a personal kinship to this band. It's kind of like all you like people who've listened to Andrew McMahon for a really long time, right? Where they go back to like something corporate or through like Jack's Mannequin, and now listen to some of his like more solo-y stuff. Anyway, same kind of idea. So Small Pools is a cool band. The album that I really like is called Love Tap in all caps with an exclamation point. And my favorite song off that album is Killer Whales, which I think is really cool. I get stuck in my head all the time.
Do you want another like weird band connection?
Sure.
Do you know the band Bleachers?
Yes.
And you know Fun?
Yes.
The lead singer of Bleachers was in Fun.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I didn't know that until I saw like a picture of Fun at one point. Yeah, I do too. Like I saw a picture of Fun at one point. It's like, that guy looks familiar, and then I like happened to listen to Bleachers not too long after that, and I was like, oh, this is it. He also writes for a lot of people. Jack Antonoff is his name. He's like really successful.
Oh, yeah. He works with Taylor Swift, doesn't he?
Pretty sure he does.
Yeah, he's like Ryan Tedder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think he has a lot of writing credits that you would be like surprised to hear about.
Interesting. I didn't know. Wow, that's like a huge, big. Wow. Okay.
I told you.
I have to go decompress.
Anyway, while Brendan does that, we're going to take a quick little break and then be right back to wrap up our Worlds Recap.
And welcome back. We're here to close out this week's episode. And again, thanks so much for stopping by for the Watchog episode of Soundproof.
Everyone remember, Brendan voted Dexit.
Watchog. Hashtag Dexit. I can't even say. I was gonna say hashtag bring back National Dex, but I just hate that so much I can't even get it out. Anyway, thanks so much for coming and listening to our post Worlds coverage. I think there was a lot of cool stuff to talk about. I'm excited about this episode a lot, so hopefully you guys are as interested in this content as we are in making it. So please continue to come back and listen to our things because we have a lot of fun making them. We're gonna be back with our regular 2-week episodes as we progress into the post-Worlds meta. But if we do happen to have, like internationals or something like that, don't be surprised if you do see another of our quote-unquote surprise, secret, ultra, double, mega episodes kind of pop up when there's like important stuff going on.
Yeah, we're going to try to stick to this 2-week schedule because we both do like work full-time and that kind of thing, blah, blah, blah.
It's too much.
I know, I don't like it. When are we going to get like 6 figures from this podcast?
Please, hurry up.
Anyway, yeah, 2 weeks is about the most we can commit to right now. We'll see in the future. We'll see what happens. But 2 weeks from now, we'll be on next episode. We'll be diving into post-Worlds metas. Again, thanks for listening. Huge shout out to Victory Road again. They compiled a list of every single Day 2 team, and this was out like 2 or 3 days ago too, so they were very quick about it. So go use their site, give them clicks and views and hits. And
I love Victory Road. They tweet out like graphics every round for the tournament too. Super cool with the teams and anyway, love Victory Road. They do great work.
So thanks to them. Thanks to you for listening. Thanks to Brendan for voting Dexit. And we will catch y'all in 2 weeks.